I was able to stack up 51,149 points for Damage Vaporizers during close scrutiny on Dam Battlegrounds. For my equipment, I brought in a Jupiter with 5 stacks of ammo, a Hole Cracker with 6 stacks of ammo, a Renegade with a single stack of ammo, 8 Wolf Packs, 2 Light Shields, a couple of healing items, a couple of shielding items, a couple of adrenaline shots, as well as a Snap Hook, a Photoelectric Cloak, and a Raider Hatch Key. Now I actually overpacked a little bit here. I essentially didn't use my Hole Cracker for the entire round. So if I were to redo this, I would actually swap out the Hole Cracker for just a bunch more Wolf Packs. But if you don't have the Wolf Packs or you don't have a Wolf Pack blueprint, I do recommend bringing in the Hole Cracker along with the Jupiter, just because the Jupiter will burn out as you're using it throughout the match. Now once you spawn in, you want to head for the Pipeline Tower. The Pipeline Tower is one of my favorite places to go for the Damaged Rocketeers trial and other Flying Arc trials. It gives you great visibility on the map, and you can pick off enemies and isolate them, making it easy for you to focus them down while you also have decent cover overall to use. Now to get on top of the Pipeline Tower, you will need zip lines or a Snap Hook. A Snap Hook's a little bit safer because it doesn't leave behind a route that somebody else can use to follow you up. Now once you get on top of the Pipeline Tower, you want to scan around for Vaporizer Spawns. I recommend that you focus on the map-based spawns first and then the Assessor spawn second. A big reason for this is the map-based spawns are easier to isolate from other players, meaning you can ensure you get the most amount of trials points for each and every elimination. From what I can tell so far, you will have 2 sets of vaporizers that spawn in the Red Lakes, spawn in the Hydrodomes, and spawn near the power generation extraction. This is not all of the spawns on the map. I'm sure there's some other places, but this is all I've seen so far in the runs that I've done. Find one of the vaporizers in any of those 3 areas and then aggro one to you using the Renegade. Once you do have the vaporizer's attention, I recommend pulling out the Jupiter or your Hole Cracker. Both of these weapons will deal significant damage to the vaporizer, and when the vaporizer takes significant damage, it usually deploys a shield. Now the shield is the same type of shield that the Matriarch has, so it will absorb 100% of projectiles and it stays up on the vaporizer for 5 total seconds. Once the shield comes down, you can throw a wolf pack if you brought them in, and the wolf pack in most cases will take out the vaporizer. Now if your wolf pack splits off and deals damage to other enemies, keep in mind that the vaporizer likely won't be one shot. But if you can isolate the vaporizer enough to ensure that your wolf pack all focuses on it, it will definitely take it down in a single wolf pack. Now while you're on top of the Pipeline Tower, you're relatively safe, but keep in mind that raiders can and still will take shots at you to try and take you out. I had a raider make an attempt in my life, or at least I think they did, because a shot came by that was super close to me. When I looked over though after I took out the vaporizer, they were dealing with a bunch of arc swans, so either arc karma got them, or they were shooting at an arc and just missed and it happened to fly super close to my head. That said, you do still need to be careful while you're up here. Now there's 2 large blue boxes that you can use for cover, and the cover will work decently well for dealing with vaporizers, but it's not perfect. The cover will block one of the vaporizer's attacks, but not both completely. If you don't know, the vaporizer has 2 unique different attacks that it uses. The first is essentially a sniper shot. It will charge up its laser beam and fire 3 individual projectiles that are essentially hit scan instantaneous damage if you're within line of sight of the vaporizer once it releases that charge. Taking one of those bolts will remove your entire shield and take away about 25% of your health. It is significantly powerful. The second attack is essentially the Queen's laser beam. It is a persistent beam that will deal immense amounts of damage if you get caught on the other side of it, and it leaves behind a trail of fire that makes the entire area very dangerous to be in. Even touching the fire for a fraction of a second will take away about half of your shield and deal about 15% of your health damage. It can drain your meds quick if you take that persistent amount of damage throughout the entirety of the game, so you got to be careful when you're dealing with vaporizers. So I will recommend that if you're going to be on top of the Pipeline Tower fighting the vaporizers, you probably want to be using your wolf packs up here. And then if you're out of wolf packs, find somewhere with a little bit more protective cover that can ensure you're not going to take that persistent fire damage when it does use its laser beam attack. Now you want to stay on top of the Pipeline Tower and continue to focus on map-based spawns until you run out of vaporizers. At some point, you will essentially eliminate all of the ones that are within your field of view, and you will need to roam to other parts of the map to find more vaporizers. Now, in terms of just dealing with the vaporizers in other parts of the map, you want to make sure that you don't ever try and aggro one when you don't have cover to use. And cover isn't just like a small wall or a rock. It is a building or a very large piece of cover that will obscure a majority of the vaporizer and yourself from it. I like the little small buildings that have essentially 2 different entrances that you can rotate in and out of. and it will mostly protect you from the laser beam, but keep in mind that the vaporizer does like to find angles and will get that laser beam deep within the area that you're hiding in and create a bunch of fire around you. So be careful while you're inside. Don't just hang out by the door, stand back a little bit until the vaporizer is done with that attack. Other places I would actually recommend not fighting the vaporizer from is in the Hydra domes. There's a couple of the domes that are pretty decent, but most of the Hydra domes have panels that are missing on the top of the domes, and the vaporizer will exploit that at any chance it gets. So while you can use the domes to fight vaporizers, just keep in mind that you want to look up on the ceiling of the domes first to figure out where the weak spots are and to make sure that you're positioned in a way that the vaporizer can't exploit that to deal damage to you. Now, additional things that I would recommend is to avoid dealing with the Assessor spawns in general. While you do get vaporizers that spawn from the Assessors, and at some points in the game you're going to have to use those to stack up your points, they will spawn with such a high volume of other enemies that it makes it nearly impossible for you to only deal damage to the vaporizer. So you end up wasting time and your ammunition picking up and cleaning up those other enemy spawns. Additionally, you don't want to be the player that's doing the breaching and opening of the Assessor components itself. But in a pinch, if nobody else is doing it, you can do that. But I highly recommend that once you've completed the breach, to use your photoelectric cloak and walk yourself to safety. The amount of enemies that spawn in as you start that breach is pretty significant, and you don't want to be out in the open trying to fight them because it is almost a guaranteed way to go down. Now beyond that, there isn't a ton more to this challenge. Keep in mind that you can and should use a Raider hatch key here. But Raider hatches don't work like the extraction does. You can't open a Raider hatch at 1 second and still get out safely. You need at least 5 seconds to open the hatch and get yourself into it before the match timer reaches 0. Whereas with a regular extraction point, you can press the button at 1 second remaining and essentially give yourself another minute on the map while the elevator arrives. For Raider hatch keys, you need to be in the Raider hatch itself at 1 second remaining, or else you're eliminated. So just keep that in mind as you are heading towards those Raider hatches. Make sure you give yourself enough time to get into it before the match ends to save your trial score and your run. Once you've stacked up enough vaporizer eliminations and you're happy with your score, head back to Speranza, collect any loot if you haven't already, and watch your score fly up the leaderboard. That's going to be it for me today, y'all. Thanks for watching.